Joining us now is CNN contributor Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He is Detroit's former health commissioner. Also with us, CNN political analyst Josh Rogin. He's the author of the new book, Chaos Under Heaven, Trump, Xi, and the Battle for the 21st Century. Guys, we will get to that WHO report in a second. But first, Dr. El-Sayed, I want to just start with the CDC director's warning. Let me play for everybody how emotional and impassioned she feels about where the country is right now.
Now is one of those times when I have to share the truth and I have to hope and trust you will listen. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to lose the script and I'm going to reflect on the recurring feeling I have of impending doom. We have so much to look forward to, so much promise and potential of where we are, and so much reason for hope. But right now I'm scared.
Dr. El-Sayed, explain this to us. With so many people, Americans, being able to get vaccinated every day, with so much immunity having been built up from all of the people who've already had coronavirus, why today does she have such impending doom?
Well, first, you can hear in her voice, and I really hope that people take what she is saying seriously. When the CDC director of the United States tells you that she has a feeling of impending doom, that's because she's looking at the evidence and is fearful of what's coming in the future as a doctor, as a public official, as a parent. Look, here's the facts. Vaccines are great, but vaccines don't work until they hit people's arms, right? And we just don't have enough vaccinations in people's arms yet to be able to achieve the kind of herd immunity that we need. The kinds of variants that are spreading right now, B117, and then the coastal variants in California, in New York, these variants we know are more resistant to the natural immunity that we pick up after having had the disease than was the wild type, the usual variant of coronavirus that we'd been dealing with in the past. You take those two things together, you look at the fact that in more than half of states numbers are ticking up, and public officials keep making decisions to continue to rescind the kinds of protective policies that had kept it from spreading in the first place, and you realize we have a perfect storm. And I think that's what she's responding to, and we've got to take it seriously.
Josh, before we get to the WHO report, I want to get your response to what ex-President Trump said in response to the CNN documentary COVID Wars, where he issued a statement teeing off the kind of statement that would have previously been a Twitter tantrum. Here's what he said. Two self-promoters trying to reinvent history to cover their bad instincts and faulty recommendations, which I fortunately always overturned. I only kept Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx on because they worked for the U.S. government so long, they're like a bad habit. Josh, Dr. Birx said in the documentary that she felt the first 100,000 deaths might have been unavoidable, but basically 450,000 Americans have died because of bad policies from President Trump. Is President Trump, in effect, taking ownership in a backhanded way for his administration's failure and those deaths by attacking the doctors and proudly saying he ignored their advice?
You know, I think there's plenty of blame to go around and a lot of things everybody wish they had done different, including Dr. Birx. But former President Trump's level of concern for the real issue at hand, which is actually the pain and suffering of millions of Americans, is next to none. And that's consistent throughout his presidency and remains. And the fact that he's focusing on his personal squabbles and not the actual suffering of Americans, which he exacerbated through his ignorance, negligence, and lies, is appalling and depressing, and is only mitigated by the small comfort that he's no longer president anymore.
I mean, he is very upset about the CNN documentary. He obviously watched it closely, or his advisors told him about it. I mean, he was really, that statement was sort of going through point by point, Josh.
He didn't learn anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's free to like put out whatever statements on whatever social media platforms haven't banned him. Luckily, he's not making the policy anymore. So, you know, yeah, his statement is depressing and appalling. But at least it won't kill any more Americans just because he's not president. And I think, you know, like that's the small comfort that I find in it.
Okay, so Dr. El-Sayed, back to where we are. Why are younger people now being hospitalized? I mean, what's happening? The idea that we're seeing spikes even among 10 to 19-year-olds. I think that, you know, obviously for the past year, the cold comfort, or small comfort, I guess I should say, that we all took as parents was, well, this is horrible. It's a horrible catastrophe, what's happening in the country, but at least our grade school kids and high schoolers aren't getting sick. And so now 10 to 19-year-olds are seeing a spike, and then those numbers that we just pulled up in terms of even just younger adults, 20 to 29-year-olds, 30 to 39-year-olds in Michigan, up 633%, 40-year-olds up 800%. Why? What's happening?
A couple of things here, and it really is tragic to hear about. You never want to hear about anybody being hospitalized or dying, but certainly not younger people in the prime of their lives. What's happening here is a mixture of things. Number one, they're the least likely to have been vaccinated. You know that we rolled out focusing on older people first, and then the way that the limited vaccine supply was staged was that you had younger and younger people getting access to it. Second, as we open up and restrictions have been rolled back in Michigan for some time, it is younger and younger people who are engaging in the kinds of social activities that they haven't been able to over the past year. And then third, I think it's the fact that, when you think about what the overall message that's being sent by a lot of the narrative that had said that the vaccines are on their way and we're done with this, the folks who hear that loudest tend to be the youngest folks who really have gone without the kind of social interactions that they've missed for some time. And I think you take those things together and you have this perfect brew that it's affecting younger people most.
Josh, let's dig into this WHO report. We have been waiting a year. CNN has obtained a draft copy. The final is going to be released later today. It spends twice as many words talking about the possibility of transmission through frozen food as it does the possibility that it was released through a mistake in the lab. What is your take on this report? And are you concerned that it sidesteps the really tough questions that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, as I wrote today in the Washington Post, the investigation and the report are both fatally flawed for a large number of glaring and obvious reasons, including that the Chinese government had veto control over the team members. They helped edit the report. According to Tony Blinken, they helped write the report. They controlled the investigation. The members of the team that weren't the Chinese officials and scientists, some of them had conflicts of interest. They ruled out the lab theory before the investigation. And then they didn't even investigate it. And then they said it doesn't even need more investigation. So, I would love to say it's worthless, but I think that's actually too kind. It's actually very harmful because it gives this imprimatur of like some sort of credibility that we learned something, when actually all it did was muddy the waters more and increase the calls for a real investigation that's really going to look at the real options, including the lab accident theory. And if these guys want to go on and search frozen food packages and find every palm civet and pangolin and from Indonesia to Bishkek, I wish them all the best, okay? But that's not going to be the investigation that tells us what happened, because they're not serious, and we need to find a different team of people who are serious to do the real investigation.
Dr. El-Sayed, I remember Sanjay Gupta telling us a year ago, back when this was starting, this was not a foodborne virus. What do you take away from this WHO report?
Yeah, I want to contrast two of the proposed potential stories of emergence that they include in the report to make a broader argument here. You look at this frozen food argument, and we know, just based on the evidence of transmission, that this virus is transmitted largely via aerosols in the air. That's why we're all wearing masks. The probability of getting it from food, let alone frozen food that has been shipped from a long way away, seems wholly implausible just when you step back and ask, does this meet our face validity? And then the second is the point that Josh has done some excellent reporting on, which is the role that the Wuhan Institute of Virology may have played. And no one's arguing that this was a purposive release, but you've got an institute that's been studying the most similar, largest homology sharing virus to the coronavirus right there in the community. And we know that these kinds of lab accidents happen all the time. And the argument that the report pushes forward, which is that the frozen food theory is more plausible and more likely than the Institute of Virology theory, as you read the report, it looks like folks are making a great effort to overinterpret any evidence around frozen food and great effort to underinterpret any evidence around the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And so, as a scientist just reading this objectively, it really is quite frustrating because it just doesn't make sense from all that we've learned about COVID-19 over the past year.
Yeah, these questions are not going away. Dr. El-Sayed, Josh Rogin, thank you both
guys.
very much for all of the information.